Hello everyone, and this is our reporting in G3, and our topic is global stratification. So, what is global stratification? So, global stratification is the hierarchical arrangement of individuals and groups into societies across the globe. Measures an equal distribution of wealth, power, prestige, and global scale. So, in simple terms, countries are positioned differently in global system. So, some are highly wealthy and industrialized, while others have lower incomes and depend more heavily on external resources and markets. So, example is some countries have, had, have advanced technology and industries, while others have limited access to technology. So, these are the main political approach of global certification. First is modernization theory, and second, the dependency theory, and lastly, the world systems theory. So
Modernization
these
theory.
approaches will be
First
tackled
is
on the next
modernization
slides.
theory. It says that the poor countries aren't poor because they haven't modernized yet. They still follow the traditional ways instead of using the new technology and ideas. Rustos even map this into four stages, from farming societies up to fully modern and consumer-rich nations.
Walt Rostow Four Stages of Modernization, an economic model he introduced back in 1960. Rostow suggested that every country goes through four predictable steps to move from a basic society to a modern economy. Stage 1, Traditional Stage. This is where a society relies mainly on simple farming just to survive. Technology is very limited, and daily life is guided mostly by tradition and habit rather than modern innovation. Stage 2, Take-off Stage. Here, things start to change. People begin producing goods not just to feed themselves, but to sell and trade. Early industries pop up, trade grows, and the market economy starts taking root. Stage 3, Drive to technological maturity. At this point, industrialization spreads to many different industries, not just a few. Cities grow rapidly as people move for work. Technology improves across the board, and overall living standards go up. High mass consumption. Finally, the economics shifts toward producing everyday consumers goods and service. People have higher incomes and enjoy a lifestyle focused on mass comfort, convenience, and spending.
And this too is that modernization theory suggests that poor countries become poorer because they are not yet modernized. But while in dependency theory, countries become poor because they are more dependent and wealthy countries. So, the core premise of dependency theory: first, global inequality is not caused by poor countries being behind, but by rich countries actively keeping them dependent. So, this idea suggests that countries is not poor because they are not modernized, but country is poor because they are more dependent in wealthy countries. So, for example, is they are more dependent in investment, technology, and manufactured products. Exploitation rooted in colonialism and continued through modern global economic rules. So, back in the history, Western countries colonized other countries to extract their resources, control their land, and take laborers. to benefit their colonial powers. So this is the key dynamics of dependency theory. So low-income countries export cheap raw materials in agriculture, while high-income countries export expensive manufactured goods, keeping low-income nations in constant debt. So, for example, is cocoa beans. Poor countries sell it in cheaper way, in cheaper prices because it is a raw material. So when they sell it in the wealthy country, they manufactured it and it becomes chocolate. So when they sell it, if the poor country bought it, it becomes more expensive. So that's the reason poor nations becoming constant debt because while they sell cheap products, they bought higher and expensive products. So that is dependency theory. Dependency theory suggests that poor countries become poor because they are more dependent on wealthier countries.
Good day, everyone. I am Paulo Joel Pipaktalan, and today I'll be presenting our topic entitled Dependency Theory and the Latin American Experience. Let's take a closer look at why many countries in Latin America have remained poor and what this theory can teach us about how the global economy really works. First, what is dependency theory exactly? Emerged back in the 1960s and 70s, right in Latin America, as a response to the idea that poor countries are poor simply because they're backward or haven't modernized yet. Dependency scholars said, no, that's not true. Poor nations are underdeveloped because of how the global system is built. Wealth flows from the poorer peripheral nations toward the richer core nations, and that flows keep, keeps poor countries dependent no matter how hard they try to catch up. So, who are the core and who are the periphery? Core nations like the US, Western Europe are industrialists control technology, finance and set prices. They sell high value manufactured goods. Peripher- Peripheral nations like most of Latin America export raw materials, crops, minerals, or oil. Then they must buy expensive manufactured goods from the core. We don't control prices, technology, or finance. Simply put, the system is built so the core gets richer while the periphery stays dependent. It's not an accident, it's the structure. This theory wasn't invented in Europe or the US. It came from Latin American scholars trying to understand their own reality. Raoul Prebisch noticed raw material price keep falling while manufactured goods keep getting more expensive. That means Latin America always loses in trade. Andre Gonder went further. Rich nations' progress actually causes poverty in poorer nations. Other scholars expanded this idea, showing how history, politics, and economics all combine to keep Latin America dependent. But how did this situation start? Let's look at history. For 300 years, Spain and Portugal structured Latin American economies to extract resources. Nothing else. No factories, no local industry. After independence, nothing changed economically. We still sold resources and bought their goods. In the 20th century, countries tried building their own industries, but still needed foreign equipment and loans. That led to the massive debt crisis of the 1980s. By the 90s, markets opened up even more, and dependency just changed form, not disappeared. This is the heart of the problem, a cycle that repeats. Latin America exports cheap resources, earns very little, must export expensive goods, spends more than earns, falls into debt, borrows from rich nations, debt grows, must export even more just to pay loans, never builds local industry, stays independent. No. Stays dependent, rather. And the hardest part, important decisions about Latin America's economy are made thousands of miles away, not by them. So, how do we break free? Dependency thinkers offer clear solutions. Trade more with each other within Latin America instead of only with rich nations. Produce what you can locally instead of importing. Keep profits from natural resources inside the country, not going to foreign corporations. Renegotiate unfair debts that trap you, and push to fix global trade rules so they stop favoring the rich. Now, is this theory perfect? No. It powerfully exposes global unfairness and explains persistent poverty. But critics say it blames everything on outsiders and ignores real problems like local corruption, bad governance, and equality within Latin America. It also can't fully explain why some Asian nations broke free while Latin America struggled. Yet, with rising debt, inequality, and resource exploitation today, dependency theory remains as relevant
Manuel
as ever.
Wallerstein introduced the modern world society theory in the 1970s as a way to explain how economic power and inequality operate on a global scale. Uh, modernization theory modernization theory examines countries individually to see what they are doing right or wrong internally. In contrast, world system theory argues that you cannot look into you cannot look at nations in isolation. The entire world is tied together in a single interconnected capitalist market economy, the world system, called the world system. This system grew out of European colonialism in the 16th century and expanded into today's global market. The primary driving force of the system is the continuous accumulation of capital and profit by global elite and multinational corporations. Economic interactions with the world system are structured to that wealth flows disproportionately from less developed regions directly into dominant ones. The prosperity of rich countries directly depends on the economic subordinations and resource extractions of poorer ones. Countries fit into three main zones based on power, wealth, and distribution.
Okay, so Wallerstein's three zones. So in this panel, uh, I will explain the three zones that Immanuel Wallerstein's world systems theory. So according to Immanuel Wallerstein's, there are countries that is divided into three positions in the global economy. The first one is the core nations, which is a powerful, highly industrialized and dominant nations. They control global finance and mostly benefit from the global system. So the second is peripheral nations. They are low income, less industrialization nations, and they mostly highly dependent on core nations. And last is the semi-peripheral nations, which is a which is a middle position between these three zones. So the first here is the core nations. Core nations are countries that are economically powerful, highly industrialized and technologically advanced. They have large companies. They have strong financial systems and also is advanced from technology and a lot of influence over international trade. You know, we can, for example, like from the United States, Japan, uh, Western Europe countries, you know, uh, have many multinational companies in major financial markets. We can also relate this to stock and financial markets and also to forex trading or the foreign exchange. From forex exchange, example for this is the US dollar. It is a dominant uh, currency that plays a very important role in international trade and finance. So, in many international transactions in commodities uh, are settled or use the price are settled or price using the US dollar currency. So this shows that this US dollar currency is a one of the dominants and economy. So this really shows how financial systems based and powerful economies can have a large influence on the rest of the world. So in simple terms, core countries have more economic power and greater influence over the global economy. The next is the peripheral nations. Peripheral nations, they have generally less industrialized and have lower income. You know, they often depend on exporting raw materials, uh, agricultural products, and natural resources, or they provide low cost or cheap labor. Yeah. Example in this zone or position is cheap labor. So if a wealthy company or a company that came from a core from the core nations uh, may establish a factory in a poorer country. That company decides to establish a factory on a poorer country because the production in that country, uh, the production in that co- the cost of production and labor in that country are cost lower or they cost cheap. So this creates jobs for local workers, but also uh, the company may still need to send a large portion of its profit back to its home country. That is why peripheral countries are often described as being dependent on core countries for investments, technology, and access to, to what? To international markets. Lastly, is we have the semi-peripheral nations. Semi-peripheral nations are actually in between the core and the periphery nation. So, in other terms, in simple terms, they are in the middle position. They are more industrialized than peripheral nation, but generally they do not have the same level or same power of economic power as from the core countries. So such as the countries that I have mentioned, that is mentioned in the PPT, which is Brazil, India, and Mexico. Example is from the India. India is well known from having also advanced technology companies, manufacturing industries, and also have a large economy. At the same time, it also has industries that actually provide uh, relatively low cost, cheap labor, and also services for international companies. So So semi-peripheral countries or nations can have both sides of the relationship. They can benefit from the global economy, but at the same time, uh, they also depend on core countries. Next, so comparative summary. In this panel, it shows the comparison between the three theories that I've shown here in this panel, and it shows why wealthy countries stays wealthy, while some countries that are poor still remains as a poor country. So the first one is the modernization theory. Uh, what does this theory means? Poor countries are less developed because they have not yet adopted the modern technology, education, industries, and systems. So like they are undeveloped, you know, and causes and the cause any uh, and the causes for this are, for example, is the lack of technology, industries, and modern development. The solution for this, the proposed solution, is improving what they have lacked. So improve the education, improve the technology, improve the industries, the infrastructure, and also improve their investments. Second is the dependency theory. So if poor countries, poor countries can remain poor because they depend too much, which is, you know, which they depend too much on richer countries for trade, investments, and technology and products. So, what causes the poverty here? Uh, Historical exploitation, like uh, unequal trade and dependence on wealthy countries. So, the proposed solution for this is rather than depending too much or depending heavily on other rich countries, the proposed solution for this is to become more self-reliant and develop local industries or improve their economy. You know? And lastly is the world systems theory. Uh, this theory we have discussed earlier from Immanuel Wallerstein's. So countries are divided into three positions. In one global economy, one is the core, second is the semi-periphery, and third is the periphery nations. So these three positions affect on how much economic power and profit they have. So uh, what causes poverty on this theory? So on the global capitalist or systems gives core countries more economic power and benefits. So like core countries are being prioritized for this. So the proposed solution for this is to reduce unequal relationships and create a more balanced global economic system. And uh, and so the last panel is conclusion and discussion. So key takeaways: no single theory explains all global inequality, but each offers a crucial lens. Modernization focus on internal development, and dependency and world systems reveals international power dynamics, so they can be unequal or unfair to other nations. So that is all to our topics, and I hope that you have learned to what we have discussed. So thank you and goodbye.